Today's podcast is brought to us by March of Dimes. Friends, March of Dimes is the leader in the fight for the health of all moms and babies. They support research, lead programs, and provide education and advocacy so that every baby can have the best possible start. Building on a successful 80-year legacy of impact and innovation, they empower every mom and every family. For more information, visit marchofdimes.org/parentinggreatkids. And also by Hard Rock All-Inclusive Resorts. Book a stay at the all-inclusive Hard Rock Hotel and Casino, Punta Cana, from July 2nd till July 6th. And on July 3rd, the KIDZ BOP Kids will be performing live in concert, followed by a meet and greet. Your stay will be jam-packed with daily activities where kids get to mingle with their favorite KIDZ BOP Kids, with non-stop dance parties, pool parties, and more. I want to go. For more information, visit hardrockhotelpuntacana.com. For 30 plus years, I've seen every type of child grow up.
Instead of giving me what I wanted, she gave me what I needed, which was truth.
Don't let emotions win. Let truth win.
Do your very best, and you should have a lot of fun while you do it. And the better you get at something, the more fun you're going to have at something.
You moms and dads are wired with everything you need to be a parent to a great kid. Welcome to Parenting Great Kids. This is episode number 101, and I'm your host, Dr. Meg Meeker. Our guest today is an extraordinary man, and his name is John Smithbaker. He's the founder of Fathers in the Field. But before we get into our discussion, I'd like to tell you a little bit about John and his story. John built a distinguished career as a CEO of Punta Group, a leading manufacturer of outdoor adventure products. During his 15-year tenure, John adeptly led the expansion of the Wyoming-based company, received accolades for bringing jobs back to Wyoming from overseas, and garnered awards for his leadership in innovative product development. Although he had the reins of an international conglomerate, he couldn't get a grip on his insatiable longing to reconcile pain, rejection, and lack of approval from a father that deserted his family. John struggled to make sense of his father choosing to leave the family when his mother was pregnant with him and leave his sister when she was 3 years old. The consequences of his father giving up his role as a pastor, provider, and protector of his family wreaked havoc in John's boyhood and manhood. Outwardly, his success was envious, but inwardly, his struggles weren't. He desperately wanted to leave the bitterness and anger behind and to learn how to forgive his dad. It took until his 40th year. In 2005, John launched Fathers in the Field to share God's love and men's love to hurting boys dealing with the same abandonment issues he dealt with as a child. His goal is to help prevent the devastating cycle of father abandonment before boys become men by sharing their heavenly father's staying power, forgiveness, and faithfulness. In the fall of 2012, John resigned from Brunton Outdoor to focus full-time on Fathers in the Field's outreach to some of the 13 million fatherless boys in the United States. John's desire is to be a catalyst by defending the cause of the fatherless. Friends, you know that I personally believe the number one problem in our country that is causing harm, dissension, and potential destruction is fatherlessness. We always worry about decisions and presidents and senators and governors and House of Representatives making policies to help kids. But the truth of the matter is one dad in one family, or one man or one adult male mentor in a family will change our country. As always, I'll share my points to ponder for you to start using right away. And remember, don't just download episodes, click subscribe, because when you do that, you're joining my parenting revolution. Also, not only are we on iTunes, but the PGK podcast is also available in the Google Play Store and Stitcher. So parents, thanks for listening. This is episode number 101. Stay with us. Friends, I want you now to listen in on a conversation I had with John Smithbaker. I know you're going to love it. Well, John, thanks so much for joining me on my podcast.
Sure. It's such an honor. And honestly, I'm a big fan of yours, so thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. I love the work you do, too. You had a distinguished career as CEO of Punta Group, which manufactures outdoor products, outdoor adventure products. But you had a huge career change, and you began a program, a ministry called Fathers in the Field. Can you tell us what was going on inside of you that prompted you to make such a dramatic change?
Sure. The very short story is I wasn't saved, and the Lord saved me when I was 40 years old, and it was on a dark road going to meet the one person that did step up in my life, my uncle. And I got out of my truck, got on my hands and knees, and begged for God's forgiveness. And I saw all my horrible sins flash before me, and I thought I was done repenting, knowing the proper words now, repenting. But I heard the Heavenly Father speak to me and say, John, now you need to forgive your earthly father for leaving you. And that's the one sin. I know that unforgiveness is a sin now, and it's the one sin that I did not want to let go of, and realizing that these boys face the same thing. We tell ourselves every single day that we're never, ever going to forgive our father for leaving. But knowing how much I had been forgiven, I said I would, and I forgave my dad. And that's when I felt the Holy Spirit enter me and cleanse me, and, was born again, knowing all the proper terminology now. But then I knew I was a new creation. And that really set on the path of my Christian walk. And shortly thereafter, I just knew I felt the prompting of the Lord to give up this world, a secular world, and start a ministry to help those I could, the fatherless, for him. And a couple of years later, I started writing the curriculum, dealing with the father wound, putting the structure together, and then finally doing both my secular job and ministry job. I couldn't do it both anymore, and I jumped in a leap of faith and did ministry full time. And it's been about 6-7 years now, and it's just been awesome.
Wow. Let's back up a little bit and tell me what it was like for you growing up without a father in the home. I assume your mother was there. And did you have siblings?
I did. I had an older sister, and I had a stepbrother. My mom was married a couple times, but I remember having a stepfather and a stepbrother for part of that. But, it's really just, the best way I can describe it is I knew that something was wrong, and that I didn't have the person in my life, my father, to help me navigate what it means and how to do it from a boy to a teen to a man. And I had to struggle to figure out all those things on my own. And it's mixed with bitterness and anger, because you feel like you're behind the curve and the cards are stacked against you every day, because there's nobody there to help you navigate what's going on. My precious dear mom was working 2 jobs to keep us afloat. And so we were just kind of there to defend for ourselves. And it was just, it makes you strong. It breaks you or it makes you strong, but it also just damages your soul, because you end up just having this much bitterness and anger towards the brokenness.
How old were you when your father left, or did you ever know your dad?
I did know him. My father left when my mom became pregnant with me. Come to find out, they were having some difficulty. My older sister was 3, and you come to find out that he didn't want me. He wanted my mom to kill me through abortion, and so you hear all these things, and then you are raised and then seeing the struggle and having an older sister and watching her pain manifest right in front of your eyes, of doing drugs and running away and all those things. So I ended up being the perfect kid, and she was a troublemaker, because I just hid my hurt. Yeah. But the Lord obviously had me deal with it later on in life.
We hear about the father wound, and obviously it's not something that I can understand. I'm I had a dad growing up. And aside from not knowing how to navigate certain things as a young boy to a teenager, as far as a male is concerned, I'm hearing that your mother couldn't fill needs that you had from a father. Can you describe how deep that father wound is and what lives in that space?
Yeah. I share this a lot in the ministry because we as adults have to understand that each one of these fatherless boys blame themselves for their father leaving. As whacked as that sounds, that's what they all do. I'm not good looking enough. I'm not special enough. I don't have enough talent. Whatever it is, they blame themselves. So you're already angry, but then you have a mother that understands you're hurting if she's aware, and they try and overly mother you. Two things happen, in my opinion, at least that happened to me, is one, I didn't want her help. I didn't want to be a good boy.
Right.
I wanted to be a brave, strong, courageous boy, but she didn't talk that language. So when she would try and continue to help me, all I heard was I wasn't good enough and I didn't know how to do it to be a man. Because at some point in time, you realize that I want to learn to be a man. And then the other part that takes over is you become, in a weird way, a surrogate father, boyfriend, overdependent male in the house, that you kind of try and fill that role for her needs. And you become overly bonded with your mother. And that's another wound that eventually has to be dealt with.
Yeah. So that has to break as well. You know, as a mother of a son, a grown son, and you know, my husband was in the home at the time. And we have 3 older daughters. And I'll tell you, I parented my daughters very differently than my son. I pushed my daughters to excel, but with my son, I felt I kind of coddled him. And I'll never forget, at 18, he looked at me and said, "Mom, quit talking to me like there's something wrong with me." And what he meant was, you always feel that you have to fix something, but you don't, because I'm a man, I'm not a boy. And boy, that was so startling to me. And I think mothers do that with the best intentions.
Yes.
To take care of their boys, but they never let the boy become a man.
Yes.
Did you ever meet your father?
I did. He divorced, obviously, my mom and started another family, and eventually got divorced there. So I didn't really have much interaction with him. There was all these fights over support, and my mom had to put him in jail because he wasn't paying. But it wasn't until in high school where I started excelling in sports, and he would stop by and watch a football or basketball game now and then. And so that was really the interaction. And you know, looking back, I'm glad I had glimpses of that, but it all it did was really pick the scab every time.
Right.
And so the other thing we try and really stress with parents is be honest with these fatherless kids. You know, instead of just trying to sweep everything under the carpet, if somebody would have told me that what I'm feeling and that anger festering inside my soul was normal to the brokenness versus it shouldn't matter. Big boys don't cry and I don't need a dad. It was all a lie. So again, as well as intention as some of the adults are, I think these boys would rather have the truth. Why did my dad leave?
Yeah. Because if you don't answer that question, the boy believes it was because of him.
Absolutely.
Because kids are so egocentric. I mean, they can't believe that that they can't control things and that their father left because of something they did. And I think you're absolutely right. One of my pet peeves is the phrase, kids will be okay. Kids are strong.
Mm-hmm.
They're not okay. I mean, how do you know they're okay? Oh, parents have been through a divorce, but the kids seem to be doing fine. They'll be okay. And that is so far from the truth. And we really, as you said, ignore kids' feelings. So back me up again to the place when you were, when you came to faith, and then you got out of the car and realized you need to forgive your dad. What was happening in the years prior to that? I assume you were a grown man, you had a family.
Yes, I was. Yeah, I was. Nearly 40 years old. My business life, I was excelling, making more money I ever thought I'd make, and having more acclaim, and all those things that you dream about growing up. And I was married and had one child at the time, and I was raised. My mom tried to raise me in a Christian home as best she could. And I remember the first time I heard the name Jesus when my sister and I were cuddled when we were very young, next to the only little heater in the house, and she was crying, praying out to Jesus because she had no food and we were cold. And but so she really tried to introduce Jesus to me, and I thank her for this day. It's the one thing she did that means everything to me now, and so I'm so grateful that she did that. But yeah, I always knew there was a God. I just didn't obviously have a personal relationship with him, and I don't know why the Lord decided to convict me that night. I have no idea.
You're like Paul. Maybe he said, "There's my next Paul," way. And he just I mean, it really sounds like God just did it.
Yeah, the only thing I think about is, on a business trip, we used to take clients out to try and, cultivate them. And we were along the Snake River with a bunch of different clients, always, being unsaved. We say, hey, don't talk about politics or religion and all those things. And one of our customers started around the fire along this beautiful trout stream, started asking people if they believed in God, and eventually got to me. And he says, you don't believe in God, do you? And I said, I do believe in God. And that's the only thing I can look about and say, well, and in my type A personality, I reframe that and think God said, well, if that's the case, let's get busy. So that's the only thing I can think about, that, I was on the pinnacle, but the Lord had different plans. And in my soul, I knew I still wasn't happy, that no matter what the next accomplishment was, that hole could not be filled, and that something else had to happen. And then, after the Lord reached down and pulled me from the pit of hell, I realized that anger and bitterness would not go away unless I forgave my earthly father for abandoning me and my family.
So, John, you feel that your drive to earn your father's approval was worked out through your perfectionism in work. And you feel that there was sort of this hole in your soul, and you feel that a lot of the boys who you work with in your ministry, do you think that they have that deep sense that you had of loneliness, that there's something in there that is missing?
Absolutely. They all do. I mean, I can see it in their eyes, that void of feeling their worth because their hero, their father, has abandoned them. And what's compounding is at the same time our culture, even well-meaning parents and family members, they tell these boys that you don't need a dad, big boys don't cry, and you'll get over it. So they suppress this deepest of hurt and pain, and it festers in so many other ways, and they don't know how to solve it. And all these acting out by these fatherless boys is a cry for help, because they know they're broken and hurting and they need help. And so I honestly, I know that they're hurting at a deepest level. It's if their heart wound could be shown of the blood dripping out of their shirt, we would take notice. And it's obviously an epidemic, and sadly, in our culture, and at the same time, they're telling these boys that you don't need a dad. So they're saying, well, if that's the case, why do I feel so bad? And then they act out, and then unfortunately, a lot of them then get medicated to sit still, to not act like boys, and it's a vicious cycle, and it's really tearing at the fabric of our culture.
It is, and I see that all the time in my practice. And you're right, the sort of modern mantra is all they really need is love. And as long as you give them love and a warm home and people to be affectionate, they'll be fine. And in fact, they aren't. Let's turn and talk about the work that you're doing. What is the vision? What are the goals of Fathers in the Field?
Well, the first thing, I'm so thankful that after I was saved, I had a bunch of wonderful godly men and a godly church that to cement my understanding of God's word. And the first thing that we love to share with people, that we're not a parachurch ministry. We do not go around the church. We go through the church, because the church, Christ died for the church, and it's his bride. And so our ministry goes through the church. So we get the privilege of coming alongside pastors and the men in those church, and coaching and training them how to mentor the fatherless. And we provide and equip them, so once we get them established, we can go to the next church and the next church. And so that's how we can reach more boys. So we're in about 36 different states right now, and steadily growing, and hundreds upon hundreds of churches, and God has been faithful that way. But I believe it's because we've been faithful to his word. And the hardest challenge we have is getting through the bureaucracy of some churches, but it's well worth it when we get established. So the primary center, the heart of our ministry, is to intentionally deal with that deep, festering soul wound in these boys. Everything we do is for that reason.
Parents, I hope you're enjoying my conversation with John Smithbaker. We need to take a quick break, but don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more of my conversation. TeenCounseling.com connects your 13 to 19-year-old with a licensed professional counselor right where they spend most of their time, on their smartphone. The process starts by completing a short questionnaire to help them understand your relationship with your teen and their specific needs. You'll then be matched with a skilled therapist in TeenCounseling.com's network of specialists who will be available to start communicating within 24 hours. You'll have the opportunity to review their credentials and directly communicate with the counselor to make sure it's a good fit. Then once you approve, the counselor and your teen will begin communicating directly. Teen Counseling is committed to facilitating great therapeutic matches, so it's easy and free to change counselors if needed. It's also more affordable than traditional counseling, and financial aid is available. So visit teencounseling.com/Meg and help your teen take charge of their mental health with the help of an experienced professional. PGK with Dr. Meg Meeker listeners can get 10% off your first month at teencounseling.com/Meg. PGK is also brought to you by Magic Spoon, a new cereal company that's discovered a way to recreate your favorite childhood cereals with 0 sugar, 12 grams of protein, and only 3 net grams of carbs in each serving. Magic Spoon offers 4 flavors based on the all-time classics: cocoa, fruity, frosted, and blueberry, plus a variety pack that lets you try them all. They've recreated the taste and texture of classic sugary cereal, but without all the junk that makes them horrible for your health. It's keto-friendly, gluten-free, grain-free, soy-free, low-carb, and GMO-free. But it tastes so incredible that you and your kids would never guess it was healthy. So now you and your kids can enjoy breakfast cereal and actually get a nutritious meal out of it. Friends, when I was a kid, my favorite cereal was Cocoa Puffs. I am so grateful that Magic Spoon has recreated that wonderful flavor in a cereal that I can eat without guilt. Go to magicspoon.com/Meg to grab a variety pack and try it today. Use promo code MEG at checkout to get free shipping. Magic Spoon is so confident in their product, it's backed by a 100% happiness guarantee. So if you don't like it for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. That's magicspoon.com/Meg and code MEG for free shipping. So you find men in different churches, and then you assign, and you train them. Then do you assign a boy to that man?
No, what we do is we allow a divine appointment. And so once we train the church calls the men. Once the men are vetted and approved by the leadership of that church, then the first man up is the first boy they get paired with. And we do this intentionally. And we don't, these boys, because I was one of them, view the world very differently. I learned to be a very good manipulator of situations because everyone felt sorry for me. And I've always been able to use that to my advantage of manipulate things. So people always wanted to give me my way because they felt sorry for me and they wanted to, in their way, help me. So we understand that going into this. So when a boy says, well, I like to fish or I like to hunt, it doesn't matter that the mentor father likes. Whatever that passion is of that mentor father, that's the divine relationship, because these boys, we don't want to, quote, give them the power in the relationship. Right. And so this man says, well, I like to fix automobiles, so that's how we're going to develop our relationship over this hobby. And the hobby, the boy may not even know about cars, but that's what the mentor father gets to share. And in a way, he gets to be the hero because he has all the information and know-how in this boy's life. And all that is to be said, not to do other than create a scenario where that mentor father can develop a committed, trusting relationship in this boy's life. Instead of saying, hey, I don't really know what I'm doing, so let's learn together. And from a boy's perspective, it's hard to develop respect and trust right away when that boy doesn't look at the mentor father as kind of a hero. And
he has to see the man as a leader.
Yes.
Because as you said, he just wants an opportunity to be the little boy.
That's right.
He wants to follow. He wants to be able to look up at this man. Are there any boys' lives or situations who have come into Fathers in the Field where you've seen a remarkable transformation? And would you mind sharing that boy's story with us?
Yes. God has been so great. We get to see so many transformations. And I believe that this is because we're being faithful. You know, over 110 times in the Bible that God says very clearly that we are to defend the cause of the fatherless. And I personally believe because they're the most vulnerable along with the widows. And knowing that these boys, our ministry's focus are the future pastor, providers, and protectors. God knows that they have a divine role in the future, and we need to reach these. This could be the next Billy Graham. It could be, who knows? And or the Charles Spurgeon of the world. But we have the privilege of seeing transformed lives, and many come to my mind. In fact, the first one that God gave us, his name was Mason, a dear fatherless boy. And I remember the story where we were just getting started and God confirmed so many things to us. But he wrote in our curriculum, because we have a 3-year curriculum broken down in 1-year terms, and it's intentionally dealing with the father wound. So step by step it goes through. The first one's based on the Lord's Prayer, Our Father in Heaven. If you think about it from a fatherless boy, to call God Father is a big stumbling block. And the second is the 10 Commandments, not only just thou shalt nots, but all the blessings that God tells us in the 10 Commandments. And if you think about honor your father and mother, and thou shalt, and adultery, and all those things that are wrapped into the 10 Commandments, that they've experienced them all. And then the third one is called the forgiveness letter, where we go through the components of a forgiveness letter. And the biggest stumbling block that we've found, and it was the same with me when I wrote my forgiveness letter, is what do I call my dad? How do I open the letter? Do I say, Dear Dad, which is a very intimate name, which most of them don't like to use, Dear SOB, Dear Jerk, Dear Abandoner? So we talk about those things, and we don't let that become a stumbling block in writing the letter. We don't make them write the letter. We say, whenever you're supernaturally, you learn to forgive your dad, then you'll want to write it and put it in writing to make it official. And so that's the beginning part of it. But Mason, when we did this, the first year curriculum, he wrote back, I will never, ever forgive my dad. And it confirmed exactly what we were saying to ourselves. And then the commitment that the man makes is bringing the field buddy to church 2 out of 4 Sundays, do a service project, going through the Journey Guide curriculum, dealing with the father wound. But make a long story short, Mason came into Sunday school class one day where I was Sunday school teacher, and he says, you won't believe what happened last night. I said, what's that, buddy? And he says, I forgave my dad for leaving.
Wow.
And I just hugged him, and we rejoiced. And I said, well, what do you want to do now? And he said, I want to share with my dad that I forgave him and go to prison and tell him that.
Oh, my. How old was Mason at this point?
He was 10 years old.
10.
And he's never really seen his dad. He just knows his dad's in prison. And so I said, well, and I wasn't his mentor father. Pastor Scott was his mentor father. So that was all arranged. And I remember Pastor Scott asking him, well, what do you think you should bring? He said, well, I'm going to bring my Bible, and I'm going to share him the letter I wrote him, the forgiveness letter. So he went there, and he got to see his dad in prison. He shared with him that he forgave him, shared Jesus with him as a 10-year-old boy could, gave him Bible. And his dad made another promise to him, said, hey, I'm supposed to get out in 6 to 8 months. I'm going to come and see you, and we're going to start anew. So obviously Mason was on cloud 9 and very happy. And 6 and 8 months came later. His dad got out of prison and just never looked up Mason. Oh. So Mason had to learn to understand that and deal with that. But in the end, he says, I am sad and hurt, but I have forgiven him.
Wow. And,
it's just stories like that. We've had so many other boys that want to commit suicide, and they get locked up into a 3-day, detention because of that threat. And they only want to see their mentor father. They don't want to see their mom or anybody. And we've had boys after that, give their life to Christ and be redeemed and become police officers and firemen, and we get to witness their baptism. But that's how Satan controls the next generation of pastor, providers, and protectors, is through that abandonment wound. And it controls every action they take until they, through the work of the Holy Spirit, learn to forgive their earthly father.
Yeah. Have you had an opportunity to see the Masons when they're 10 and then Mason when he's 20, or boys like that? How much of a follow-through do you get with these boys?
Yeah, a lot. I mean, when they last the 3 years in the ministry, and a lot of times the moms are very transient, so they don't necessarily last all 3 years, but if they last all 3 years, we see significant transformation. And everything from, receiving Christ as their Savior to graduating high school. But since we're just finishing our 10th year, Mason is now 24 years old. So, we know when his birthday is, and he's a productive citizen, not in jail like most statistics. We have others that are, like I said, really having productive lives. So we're just now at the front end getting to see the adulthood of a lot of those mentees that we've had. And it's very encouraging.
I applaud what you're doing so much, because I think from a child's standpoint, from a boy's standpoint, for me looking on the outside, it would seem to me that the real success of the ministry comes from the fact that men step up and say to a young boy, you can trust me, I will care for you, and I'm not going anywhere. And I think that those are really difficult for these young boys who've never trusted anybody, who've never felt loved by a man, and who've never said, I'm not going to go anywhere. And so I would imagine it would be hard for them to begin a relationship with a man like that. But I also think that the fact that you work with, or you have men who work with these boys over time, it's not just a 6 months here. Yes. I'm going to come in a class and I'm going to tutor you, and I'll see you once or twice a month, and then I'm done after 6 months. This is a real commitment that men are making to these young boys.
Yes, that's really the heart of it. You're so smart, because you get it. It's a 3-year commitment broken into 1 year times, and we do that 1 year at a time. We do that so a father's boy gets to see a man live through his commitment 3 times, and that is part of the intentional healing process. Part of our coaching is we tell these men, your job is not to fix this boy. Your job, your commitment, is to live up to your commitment. And we tell these, and we coach these boys. I say it all the time. The father's boy doesn't believe, and he won't even hear anything you tell them for the first year.
I believe it, yeah.
Because they think you're lying to them. So it doesn't matter what you say, it matters what you do. And when you say, and part of this is not having a mentoring relationship based on the convenience of the man, but having a mentoring relationship based on prescribed commitments that the fatherless boy gets to see this man live up to. I can't tell you how many fatherless boys like myself, when I heard my dad said he's going to come pick me up this weekend, and I'm looking out the window, dying for him to come pick me up, and he doesn't show. And it just suppresses and deepens and stretches that wound beyond belief. But when a mentor father says, hey, I'm going to pick you up for Sunday school and church. I'll be there at 8 o'clock this Sunday. And he shows up. That boy's heart leaps for joy. That man doesn't have to say one thing, not one thing. And that's what we have to say. Keep your mouth shut and listen and just live up to your commitments. That boy will then learn that he can trust you and that what you have to say is valuable. We share all the time that, in my opinion, this is anecdotal, but I see it all the time. It happened in my life and that the average fatherless boy gets abandoned 7 times.
Oh, boy.
Because what we don't think is abandonment, and I try to share this with single moms. So the father leaves, and then you have a boyfriend when they're young.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden they start calling him daddy, and then that relationship ends. And then you get remarried, and you have a stepdad that he calls dad. But as you know, second marriages with children have a high divorce rate, almost 75%. So then he gets abandoned again. Mm-hmm. So the hurt and wound is part of the really important coaching we give churches and men to fully understand this father wound and how to address it. They know how to hunt and fish or woodwork, so they can be the hero there. But understanding the world that this fatherless boy sees through his glasses is so important to helping him. Yeah. We try to address these boys through adult eyes, and if we can look through the world through a broken, hurting, desperate fatherless boy's eyes, then it makes sense.
So often I hear parents say things, like, oh, my kids will be fine. They're fine. Kids are resilient. And I say, they really aren't. They need help. They are broken, but they're not going to tell you that. They're not going to say, Mom, I really miss Dad. I wish, Dad would show up. I wish Dad would fill that void in my life, because they can't articulate that. So, John, this is just a remarkable, remarkable ministry. How can people, particularly single mothers, get connected with fathers in the field, or how can they find out more about what you do?
Yes, they can certainly go to fathersinthefield.com, and there's a contact us and let us know. And, we've realized through our ministry that the single mom demographic is the largest unchurched people group in America. And the reason that is, even if the mom wanted to go to church, they're typically working the service jobs that are on the weekend, or Sunday is their one day off and they have to get caught up on things. Yeah. So part of what we do is when we go into a church, get them to make a commitment. We help them reach out into the single mom network. Yeah. So we teach the church to be proactive. Yeah. And so that's the big thing. So once the single mom network and that community gets tapped into and a few fatherless boys start being mentored, the church then will have all kinds of people, single moms, knocking at their doors because they want their son to be helped. So we don't realize how many fathers are among us, and that's one of the things we educate churches on. But I really encourage single moms to seek us out, because if they attend a church or they don't attend a church, it doesn't matter. We will fight with everything we have in us to get a local church enrolled so their fatherless boy can have a godly mentor. Yeah. And it can take longer than we'd like sometimes if they don't belong to a church and it's long distance and we don't have a missionary there yet, but we will give everything we have to get that done.
Yeah. Well, in 10 years to be in 36 states, is that what you said? Yeah. That's remarkable. I mean, that is absolutely remarkable. Well, John, I can't thank you enough for the work that you do, for coming and being on the podcast And I just really hope that you pierce some hearts of some parents, some fathers who are not in contact with their sons, or single moms who feel like they just can't help their boys or they're exhausted, that this is a wonderful, wonderful resource, Fathers in the Field. So thank you for selling your house and packing up and starting Fathers in the Field. And thank your wife for us as well.
Oh, thank you. It's been a wonderful journey, and I've never have experienced such joy being in the will of God, knowing that this is why He made me. This is why He took me through that tough time in my life, so I could see Follis Boy's eyes get rekindled with the Spirit of God, saying, I do have worth, I do have purpose, and I was not a mistake.
Oh, amen. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Now, on to my points to ponder. 1, find a boy who has no father. You know, often when we meet single mothers, we ask how we can help. And while this is wonderful and very important, we tend to overlook the needs of her children, particularly her sons. So we must be diligent in helping single moms, then go beyond them and look at what their kids need. Kids can look like they're doing well, but many of those kids can put on a good face just like their parents. 2, don't assume boys are okay and that they adapt well. We hear the phrase, kids are resilient, or kids will do fine. We do this because we don't want to face our kids' very real fears and hurts. Kids can appear to be doing well on the outside, but underneath, they hurt terribly. Many times their hurt doesn't surface until they're older. Boys in particular can put on a good front, but every boy grieves not having a dad. We know this through many studies. So if you know a boy with no father, please reach out to him. Take him fishing, take him hiking, take him to a movie along with your own kids or alone. And don't just do this once. Commit to that boy to stay in touch with him for the long haul. Most boys don't trust men because their fathers left. So make sure that this young boy learns to trust you, and it's going to take time. 3, don't be afraid you're not enough. Many men want to help boys but feel like they're going to make mistakes. What if they say the wrong thing or the boy gets mad and won't cooperate? The truth is, just having a man's interest is all the boy wants. He doesn't want you to be an expert at anything or always come up with fun things to do. What he wants and needs is your attention and your time. That's it. So even if you don't have much to say at first or you feel awkward interacting with him, do it anyway. It will get easier the more time you spend together. I want to thank my guest, John Smithbaker. To find out more about Fathers in the Field, go to fathersinthefield.com. You have to look it up, friends. They're doing amazing work. Let's recap my points to ponder. 1, find a boy who has no father. They're everywhere, friends. 2, don't assume boys are okay. And 3, don't be afraid you're not enough. So until next time, parents, always remember that great kids are raised, not born.
Hey, this is Bobby, producer of Meg Meeker's Parenting Great Kids podcast. Thanks for listening, and because of your dedication to raising great kids, Dr. Meg's Parenting Revolution has grown to over 3 million downloads. Head on over to Facebook and Twitter and follow @MegMeekerMD and check out what's new at megmeeker.com. And while you're there, sign up for the newsletter to stay updated and get information about giveaways. Don't forget to share the podcast with other parents, subscribe so you won't miss anything, and leave us a review so we know how we're doing.